Let's see. I am Nathan Seidle from Sparkfun Electronics. We're going to talk today with Glenn. He is the CEO of Sparkfun Electronics. I'm the founder. So one thing you should take away from this presentation today is how can I start my own business? Do I have to be the CEO? Can I be the founder? How does this work? I think Sparkfun is in an interesting situation that we're going to try to share with you as much of our lessons as we can. So quick story of Sparkfun and where we came from. Has anyone ever heard of Sparkfun? Have you ever bought any electronics from Sparkfun? And if the answer is, yeah, fantastic, we got a couple nerds. Cool. Okay, I run an e-commerce business. This is how I make money. You go to my website, you add things to your cart, you give me your credit card number, and I ship you little bits. That's how I make money. It is a business. Whether it is open or closed, it's a business. That's how I make money. Does that make sense? Now, when I make those things, do I charge you more than what it costs me? Yes. That's called profit. Yes, that's how business works. So if we're going to talk about open and closed businesses today, it doesn't matter whether you're open or closed. This is how you do business. So how does a business start? That's me with red hair sitting in the crew boat shortly before Halloween many, many years ago. Okay, I'm an electrical engineer. Are you all getting a master's degree? You are smarter than me, right? I am an undergrad. That's as far as I got. I graduated, I'm 40-something, I come from Oklahoma, and there's no one else in my family that did business. Okay, I don't come from a large family of business owners. I'm just this weird kid that my parents had that I started this thing out of my apartment when I was in college. In 2002, how do you start a business? I walked to a bookstore and I bought that book. And that book said, oh, you have to write a business plan. Are you all writing a business plan? Yes? Okay. Realize that the business plan that I wrote for Sparkfun applied for 6 weeks before I threw it out the window. Okay? You have a plan. Good for you. Be ready to modify that plan to follow the money. Do what people want to pay for. Don't do what you think they'll pay for. Make sense? Yes. Business plans, they remain flexible. The way that Sparkfun started was not with venture capital. The vast majority of businesses in this world do not have venture capital. 99 point some number are mom and pop shops, people popping up, people making business, people figuring out how to make money in this world. They don't get VC. Do not grade yourself by how much venture capital you convince someone to give you. Grade yourself by how much money you make. Grade yourself by how profitable you are. Grade yourself by what you bring to the world, not by how much VC you raise. Someone asked, well, how do I start my business? This is so much capital. This is called bootstrapping. I had $2,500 worth of credit card debt. That's how I started my business. I took that $2,500, I bought $500 worth of things, and I sold it to you all for $1,000. I doubled my money. Now, did I go to Vegas? Did I go buy a winter coat? Did I go buy an expensive car? No, I bought $1,000 more of parts, and I sold those to you all for $2,000. And I continued to double that money every single time. It's called bootstrapping. Now today, Glenn and I own, I think it's like 98, 99% of Sparkfun. There's some other shares to some other family members, but the point here is that we are in control of our destiny. We own all the shares of the company. We have no external investors. We can do whatever the hell we want. So you start your own business. What does it look like? On day one, I turned on the website, and I remember the day. I was in my apartment, and I got an order. And I go, oh my goodness, how do I ship? I need boxes. I got to figure out how to ship this thing. There was nothing in that book that told me how to ship an order. You're going to learn all sorts of stuff at Ivy, but there are going to be so many things, as the previous speaker said. The point of being an entrepreneur is to kind of come across those challenges and figure it out as you go. No book is going to tell you how to ship to France. I thought I was going to sell parts to my friends in Colorado. I have no idea how to ship a thing to France. How do you ship international? I don't, but they gave me money, so let's go figure it out. Let's Google it. The fifth order was for 3 of something. That's something called back orders. I had 1 of every item. So when the customer bought 3, I didn't have 3. I had to email the customer and figure it out. For the first few years, you can see that picture in the corner. That is a picture of a green bed with a desk in the background and a chest of, that is my bedroom. I was shipping things out of my bedroom. It's crazy, right? The power of the internet. When you order something on the internet, you get a brown box at your doorstep. Cool. right? As long as it's got the right stuff in it. Do you care whether it came from a gigantic Amazon distribution center or a small mom and pop shop? No, you don't care, as long as the right stuff shows up. Well, if you knew that you were buying from somebody in their bedroom, how would you feel about that transaction? Not very good. So, power of the internet. We make ourselves look as big or as small as we need to. Okay? I used the royal we. I said, oh, we at Sparkfun will take care of you. It was just me in my bedroom. But I wanted you, the user, to realize that we were a legitimate business. So for a long time, we were the royal we. Now we're about 100 employees. Today, we are 21 years old. Sparkfun can drink in America, yay. We have about 100 employees, and we have some number of dogs. I don't know, we have a lot of dogs at Sparkfun. We have 2,500 SKUs on the website. So USB cables, screwdrivers, enclosures, also a lot of electronics. We also have 500 originals. So those are products that are manufactured at my facility down in Boulder, Colorado, okay? And none of those, there's no intellectual property on any of those products. 2016, that's me, that's Glenn. I fired myself as CEO of Sparkfun. It's really, 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 really hard to run a company. I'm an engineer through and through, so I found Glenn. We did a search. We discovered Glenn. He was working at an enormous multi-billion-dollar company and agreed to come run Sparkfun, and I have never been happier. It is so nice to set me in the corner just designing stuff. Glenn concentrates on all the stuff that has to go on. Marketing and engineering and shipping and manufacturing and customer service and finance and all sorts of stuff, right? The day-to-day operations of a 100-person business, what are we, 24 million a year in revenue, right? There's a tremendous amount of stuff going on, and luckily, he loves doing it, and I love telling you about this new widget that I designed, right? We divide and conquer. We're doing a really good job. Let's talk about a business model. Okay, how does this work? How do I make money? Sparkfun has, we do three things. We take technology and we make it accessible to everyone. We take small stuff and make it bigger, and then we teach people. What does that look like? That is a distance sensor. Okay, there it is, an extra quarter to give you a sense of scale, but whenever you wave your hand in front of a towel dispenser, that's the sensor. Okay, cool. So first we write documentation. We say, hey, this is what it is, this is how you hook it up, this is how, you know, the wires that you need, any kind of requirements. And then we do a video. We say, hey, here's the thing. Here's what it looks like in real life. As we move this back and forth, you can see the numbers change. You can see that that video has about 21,000 views, not that many, but it shows people, you know, they can get it either via the video or via the text. Now let's talk about this. Is this unique to open source business? No, every business should do this. If you create good documentation for your product, it will help with customer service. It will help with branding. It will do all sorts of, this is how to be a good business. It isn't about open or closed, it's how to run a better business. Lastly, our customers will take that thing and do weird things with them. Anybody know what this is? Does anybody brew beer or make wine? No. So that device, hydrometer, it's the thing that you float inside of the liquid that measures the sugar content that will be converted into alcohol. So over time, the yeast eats the sugar and converts it to alcohol. So over time, we didn't build this. A customer sent this to us. They were like, oh, thank you so much for breaking out that hand sensor. Now I can use this to monitor the sugar to alcohol conversion of my wine. So over time, that floating thing moves up and down based on how much alcohol is in the liquid, and using our distance sensor, they can graph that in real time. Wacky, right? That's not a product I would ever create, but I created the tools to enable the folks to do that. And I sell it for more than I made it. You make profit. That part number, VL6180, if you look, Sparkfun first, Sparkfun second, Sparkfun third, the distributors fourth, and the people that actually spent the millions of dollars to develop that sensor is fifth. Why are we ranking higher on Google than the people that made the actual sensor? Because we're doing good business. We wrote the documentation, we created the video, we created the interesting projects so that when people Google that part number, Google says, oh yeah, you might want the data sheet, but what you really want to see is the stuff that Sparkfun did. We have parts on Mars. right? This is Ingenuity. This is the helicopter that they have flown on the surface of Mars. This is awesome. I'm a nerd. I'm on like millions and millions of miles away. This is incredible. We also have some really high power products that enable all sorts of interesting projects. This is one near and dear to my heart. This is high precision GPS. Okay, so when this whole thing is up and running, you can tell where you are in the world within about 10 millimeters. Okay, here or here, here or here. 10 millimeters. What can we use that for? Some really interesting applications. In this case, what they were doing was the military, this is a third-party contractor, but they were buying our product because the military would train soldiers to detect landmines. So they'd sweep the magnetometer back and forth, and then they would have to test the soldiers to see if they were correctly using that magnetometer. They used our device on the head of the magnetometer to see that the soldier had swung the magnetometer in the correct area. You don't want too much overlap and you don't want gaps because you may miss that landmine. I never dreamed that my products would be used for this, but there are customers all over the world. Kyle said it best. You know, the big vendors of the world have 90% of the population. If you can find a 1% customer base, what is 1% of 8 billion people, right? 80 million customers. That's a few, right? If I can capture 1% of the pie, I've got a huge customer base. So Sparkfun doesn't worry about capturing customers. We have customers coming out of our ears. It's just a question of, can you design a product that creates value for that customer? So this is the last slide before me and Glenn would love to answer some questions for you all. The things that we've learned over the years is transition success is extremely low. When Glenn and I first agreed to start working together, I would step down as CEO, he would become the CEO. Everyone I talked to said, you're a fool, you're gonna fail. You might as well set the business on fire. So luckily, we were one of the very few companies that were successful in having a founder step aside and have a CEO step in. So perhaps there's lessons there that you can learn from us if you have questions. Second of all, different backgrounds matter. Glenn and I are very different. We have very different passions. I love to tell him about my electronic projects, and he says, that's nice, Nathan, go back to your corner. And similarly, I ask him about armball. I don't know anything about armball, right? We come from different backgrounds. We have different interests, and those different backgrounds matter. They add value to our business. Oshawa keeps us hungry, okay? So a lot of people talk open, closed. Kyle mentioned that his products, he has intellectual property, right? He has trademarks, he has patents. Was he copied? Yes. That does not protect you from being copied. I get copied all the time. I wear it as a badge of honor. It's so exciting to see my products on AliExpress. 10 weeks after I come out with a product, it's on Amazon. I love that. It means that I'm doing something so important and so valuable that it's copied. There's value, that people think that there's value there. That's great. What does that mean for me as a business? It means that I gotta be hungry. I have to move fast. If I'm gonna be copied in 10 weeks, what is the next product I gotta come out with? How can I outdo that competitor? I have so many processes at Sparkfun to enable us to move at speed. Now, how would I feel if I had a patent for 17 years? Would I have those same processes in place? No. My lawyer bill would be through the roof, suing everybody that violated my patent, and I'd be really mad at everybody. Am I mad at anyone? No, I'm very happy, right? Whenever I get copied, it's a good thing. The question is, can you design a business, open or closed, to be healthy enough to move fast enough to compete in today's world? Now, Wendy, you pointed out there's the old way, there's the old business model or the new business model. Which one are you going to choose? I've chosen mine, and I think it makes me more profitable, right? The open source is good for humanity. That's great. We can all stand on the shoulders of others, but I think open source I like open source too because I make more money, because it makes me a healthier business. And at the end of the day, there's this joke, I think, was it Jimmy Carter? No, maybe it was Bill Clinton, I forget who said it, but it's the economy, stupid, right? It's profit, stupid. Do whatever's profitable. Figure out what you gotta do. And in my opinion, filing patents and lawyering up is not the most profitable way of running a business. So, Glenn, how did I do?
Great as usual.
So, we're going to open up the floor, and then Glenn and I would love to answer kind of what questions you have in terms of business We had some questions earlier that I think Wendy and Kyle did a good job answering. If you want to ask those questions again, or where would you like to go? What would you like to talk about? And if you don't have questions, then I'll start asking you guys questions. You don't want me to ask you questions. Yes. So Glenn, I don't know if you heard, but the question was, you have customers that are DIY customers and you have sort of big corporate customers. And then how do we design products for those different market segments? In short, the answer is we don't. We say, here's this product, this is what it's capable of, and then whatever user shows up to purchase that, they do. We've seen everybody from Apple, HP, to zip codes outside of Langley. It's where the CIA is buying our product. Yes? When you Google certain things, we show up very high. So we spend no money on SEO. We spend no money on ads. We spend all of our time and energy on creating content that creates word of mouth business. So that was the answer to your second question. Your first question is, how do we scale? We have 500 different products that we manufacture. We build the ones that make us the most profit and that are out of stock. It's just a question of, like, we throw spaghetti at the wall, and if it doesn't sell, we don't build any more. Those, we build the next one. Yes, sir. Yes. So the question is, do we have different pricing models for those that buy in bulk? Yes, we have a whole distributorship. So I don't know Thai. I don't know how to do tech support in Thailand. I don't know how to get through Thai customs. So we have a distributor. We have 450 distributors all over the world that resell our products. We give them margin. Yes, sir. A dart? You laughed.
What was the question, Nate? I'm sorry.
Oh, what was the question? How do we determine the price point for our products? I'll pick on your ball cap. So let's say you came out with a ball cap and you want to sell that on the internet. Are you going to sell for $5? No, you probably want to sell it for more than you made it. So first you're going to take into account your bill of materials, and then you're going to look at the other ball caps out there and you say, well, if I price it $100, I'm a little more expensive than all the other ball cap makers. So you do just a quick market analysis and say, well, it looks like the average price is about $25. Let's sell it about there. How do we cut the cost for different products? So Glenn, this might be a good one for you. The question is, how do you cut the cost of manufacturing products when the scale at Sparkfun is, the volumes vary so dramatically?
No, I think there are a few things. One is you could pull the lever in terms of bulk purchases for raw goods, right? That's one. So you get decreased pricing. And then it's not just about the margins too. I think one of the things you need to consider from a financial perspective are beyond the margins, it's also payment terms, cash flow, right? Do I get paid sooner than I have to pay my vendor or supplier? You know, there's a supplier that we love that we don't have to pay them for another 180, 90 days for certain products or certain components. And then we get paid through credit cards. So while margin is important, and I think there are a few things you could do in terms of bulk purchases on the raw component side, don't always factor in sort of the working capital model of that as well. That makes sense.
Another great question for Glenn. So the question being, if anyone can technically copy what we do, how do you differentiate, or how do you make it so that the customer comes back to us instead of one of our competitors?
Well, I think the iterative process for the product itself, one of the things I would say from an open source perspective that keeps us honest is when you think about the tech space that Sparkfun plays in, the way I reconcile this is this: the tech market rewards you for not policies, procedures, not standards. They reward you for innovation. And so for us, even though we put a product out maybe 5 years ago, Nate and the team are always iterating on that product, right? And that's the beauty of what open source does for us. It just keeps us honest. And then the other thing too is our products work. Sure, could you buy something cheaper on Amazon that was manufactured wherever? Sure, but they won't have the same documentation. They won't have the same sort of support we provide. And so it's the value that I think you could wrap around the product beyond the product itself. And for us, as Nate mentioned earlier in his slide, it's digital content, it's a how-to tutorials, and it's really the community that supports us for a lot of those things.
I suspect you will all be very employable someday, right? You will be very expensive. Your employer will say your time is worth this much money. So,
yep.
Am I going to get upset, as an employer, am I going to get upset with you if you purchase this $400 thing if it saves you 4 hours? No, I think that's going to be a steal. That's going to be great. That's going to be valuable. The same thing applies at Sparkfun. We sell these devices to engineers all over the world, and we may not be the cheapest, but in the end, we save you time and money because we have the best documentation. You come back to us because you know that you're saving money. Yes, sir. So the question was, how does Sparkfun approach R&D and design to pick the products that our customers are going to want? I would encourage each of you, how to say this, some of us are interested in becoming entrepreneurs. Some of us aren't. You want to go work for a big company? Cool. I'm not cut from that fabric. I didn't want to do what other people told me to do. I want to go do the thing that I wanted to do. How do I pick the products that I think are going to sell? I love this. I love electronics. The previous speaker loved 3D printing. I don't know if you could tell, but he could tell you all about his 3D printing. I could tell you all about electronics. I'm very good at swimming in my own hobby, like enjoying it, reading about it, being on the internet. And so I think I have a better batting average than some because I'm in that world. Okay? So if you want to start your own company, don't start in electronics. Don't start it in something you're not comfortable with. Start a business in something that you really, really enjoy, because it's going to eat up all your time. It's going to eat up your weekends. It's going to drive your spouse crazy, because at night they're going to say, why are you working? And you're going to say, I'm not working. I'm just playing. I'm just doing my hobby. But you're going to get better and better about that field, and therefore you're going to see the rough edges. You're going to say, oh man, that's really hard to do, that I don't know, woodworking thing. I wonder if I could create a jig to help woodworkers do this thing, maybe they'd find value. Nobody else is going to see that unless you're a woodworker, right? How do I design the products? I build Halloween costumes, okay? And based on building that Halloween costume, I find that this one aspect to the circuit is really hard to deal with, and so I'm going to go design a board that solves that issue. And then suddenly there's thousands of people that also had that issue that I didn't know about that need to buy that fix. Does that answer your question? That's how we do R&D. We really enjoy, we are really involved in that business. I'm going to jump to the back and then I'll come back. Yes, sir. So, wow. Ooh, okay, Glenn, you're going to be on the spot here. The first question was repeated for me. What are the main challenges of our industry, and what are we doing to remain competitive in that industry?
Well, I think for the, 8 years Nathan and I have been working together, I think the benefit Sparkfun had in the early years was that they were first in the market, right? If you think about all the content tutorials, hookup guys that Nate did when he was, a sophomore in college, no one was doing that 20 years ago. And so one of our challenges today is really fighting the bigger companies that are trying to, work in our space. And that is, new product introductions, the tech puzzle pieces. But it's staying ahead of that curve in terms of the quality of content we put out there, I think, is number one. Part of our evolution too in the past, I'd say 8 years. Nate talked about I think, Nate, you were addressing this whole, how do you manage NPI, right? And there's this classic debate of, is it product driven or is it market driven? And what I mean by that is, when it's product driven, it's, whatever Nate's interested in. Nate didn't cover what he does today. So Nate manages actually SparkX, right? It's essentially our version of Skunkworks. One of the things that was important to me when I came on board was, how do we leverage the founder and owner in such a way that, we don't box him in. How does he keep creative? And so we put Nate in a corner, as he said, and Nate just does what he wants to do in terms of product dev, and it's creative. The GPS arcade is a perfect example. We had no idea what that market was about. We had no idea where that product was going to go. But guess what? It's one of our highest sellers. But then the other half of Sparkfun, from a product dev perspective, is we hired someone called Kirk, who's our CTO, and Nate obviously hired myself. And someone was right. When bigger companies come to us, they see the value in which the speed we could put products out to market. And whether it's a new IC, whatever, they work with us. But we don't give that to Nate, because that's the last thing he wants to deal with. And so what we've done from a business perspective is, find that balance of catering, the speed in which Nate has always operated in, but formalizing our engagement with some of the larger companies. And so that's one of the ways that we've been able to sort of, stay relevant, keep the value in the market, because we know we play in both spaces. So it's trying to find the right balance and value that you're going to get paid for.
And Glenn, can you try to turn on your video while I take the follow-up question, and I'll move down here. What's the follow-up question?
Sure.
What does, interfacing to a larger company, what does formalizing this, Glenn, what does formalizing our relationships with larger companies mean?
All right, so you take an example of Digi. Right, so Digi is this huge company. They're looking at Sparkfun to create a dev kit, and the dev kit essentially enables engineers outside of the B2C world, our direct business, to play with our products. And so what we've done is we formalize relationships with some of those folks in terms of, what does the engagement look like? What are they willing to pay for in terms of content creation and all that stuff? So it's I think the biggest challenge with some of the larger companies, they look at Sparkfun and they could see the speed in which we operate. What we have to protect from our perspective is, are we getting something out of it as well? And it's not just, the pay for profit, but it's, are we creating value in the market that wouldn't otherwise exist on its own? And so when I say formalized partnerships, it's about NPI having a roadmap with certain hardware vendors and providers to say that we could deliver this in Q3, Q4, which is not something that existed, Nate, keep me honest, that existed 8 years ago. No. And so we had to grow up as a company. And so it's just, I joke, one of the biggest challenges I had at Sparkfun was what I didn't realize, I realized Nate started the company as a sophomore, but think about how young the organization was, right? And so we were not just growing up as a company from a business model perspective, we were growing up as individuals. And so when I say formalize, it's formalizing those relationships in a more, I don't want to say controlled way, but just making sure we set the right expectations with some of these larger partners. Because if we weren't careful, they would suck our time. And that's something that we just have to protect. Hopefully that answers it.
Yes, sir. So the question was, how do we work with the manufacturing partners across the world? We really don't. We sell ones and twos to 1 million different customers, singletons, across the world. We have 2 SMD lines in Boulder, Colorado, where we, do you know what SMD lines are? It's, you got the bare circuit board, you put the stuff on the board, you send it through the reflow oven, and then you have an assembled thing. We do that assembly ourselves in Boulder, but we don't work with larger manufacturers to integrate our product into their devices. We're really the prototyping step where people buy our stuff to build a proof of concept.
Yeah, think of us as a tech puzzle piece, essentially.
2 questions. This hand went up slightly first. Go ahead. So how would we handle a customer who has, one customer has certain requirements, a different customer has other requirements? I'll answer that in 2 pieces. One, in the United States, leaded solder is still allowed. Lead-free solder leaded solder is illegal in Europe. It has to be lead-free. Okay, so Sparkfun has 2 different regulatory things competing. What do? We go to the least common denominator and say, we're going to make it lead-free so that we can sell it all over the world. Okay, now you say, you've got this customer, they need these requirements, these requirements. We don't build things to customer requirements. So I'll give you an interesting story. I designed a board with a bunch of sensors on it, and it was the first of its kind, first in the world to have these sensors on the board. I messed it up. The ground plane was broken, meaning I had to solder a wire to the board to make it work. Okay? If you looked at that and you said, that looks ugly, I'm not going to buy, why would you buy a product that has an error? Okay? So I took a picture of the thing with the wire on it, and I put it on the website, and I said, we screwed up. We are selling these boards at this price with this wire on it. This is what it can do. Here are the specifications. I set expectations for the customers very clearly. Guess what? We sold out in a day. Customers were willing to buy the thing with the error on it because, 1, you couldn't get it anywhere else. They understood the expectations, and they were ready to give me money. They voted with their dollars. Now, let's say I had done the same product, but I had not posted a picture of the wire on it, and you, the customer, got a board with a wire on it. You'd be mad. You'd be upset. You'd feel swindled. So what Sparkfun has learned over the years is to set expectations. Say, this is what it can do, this is what it can't do. So in terms of the customer that's looking for those different requirements, I'm going to post a product that has a certain level of criteria, and it either matches theirs or they don't. So we always want to set those very clear expectations. And that way, our customers are very happy. They're never caught off guard. And there was another question. Yes, sir. Ooh. Hey, Glenn, what are our most challenging or pressing issues today?
Oh my gosh.
What keeps you up at night?
Labor. Oh gosh. For the past 5 years?
Supply chain,
COVID,
labor.
supply chain, labor, all the above. I mean, I think it's getting the right talent, making sure that we stay relevant in the market that we play in, and being honestly, you know, Nate and I always talk about, you know, how do we evolve, what do we do differently, but ultimately just making sure that it's just as important to keep yourself honest in what you are versus what you are not, right? You know, many companies come to us, for example, they say, oh, Sparkfun's a contract manufacturer. They could build, they could do it. Like, sure, we can, but that's not our business model. I'll point us back to the early point that Nate made about it's the value for us is saving time. It's not being a CM. It's not being in that manufacturing space. It's not being into that sort of finished goods, sort of final product stage. It's new product introductions, making technology accessible, and just staying true to that. I think it is important for all businesses. But for Sparkfun, same challenges you see in the news and have seen for several years now, right? Trade, labor, financing, credit, all the above.
Geopolitical tweets, right? Some politician somewhere says a thing that caused tariffs to go up, right? Supply chain issues. Suddenly we can't bring solar cells into the U.S. The Suez Canal gets blocked, right? All sorts of, is that open source or closed source? Really? No, it's just business. It's business problems. 98% of what we got going on are regular old business problems. I think, and Glenn, again, keep me honest, in terms of our documentation quality over the past 10 years has increased dramatically because our competitors' documentation increased dramatically. We couldn't just sit on our laurels. We had to compete with the Adafruits and the Seed Studios and the other kind of electronics manufacturers in the world. That's a good thing for you as a customer, right? Overall, the documentation for all the products are better. So I'm a big proponent of competition. If you're going to box somebody out with intellectual property, the end customer is going to hurt. Whereas if you open it up, I got to compete, I got to do just as good as everybody else, and that's forced us to become a better company.
Yeah, I mean, the business challenge will exist regardless of what your model is. And I often get asked the question, what's the difference between running a company like Sparkfun versus where I came from? You know, whether you're 30 billion or 30 million, they're the same challenges, right? In terms of manufacturing cost. Focus on your products, focus on your customers, keep yourself honest in terms of the value you have in the market, and you'll be just fine.
We got to have cash flow. We got to make payroll.
Yep.
We got to do
all the same. It's all the same.
Yes, sir. So if I didn't have Sparkfun, what other opportunities would I see in the open source world? Now, are you talking about the assignment that you're supposed to do? I love that. Very good. I would go back to the previous statement about, you know, finding the thing that's really interesting to you, right? And I think Alicia painted a very good picture of, while we are heavy on the electronics kind of branch inside of open source hardware encapsulates all sorts of things. So to answer your question, if I didn't have Sparkfun today, I would be very interested in open source biomedical equipment. So the equipment that it takes to test something or mix something or prepare slides, or these devices are eye-wateringly expensive. And from an electromechanical point of view, I go, wait a second, that's just some springs and this and that. How are they charging $35,000 for that? So that would be my own personal itch. But for the people in the room, find a niche that has you very interested. It'll make life a little easier. And then to play back to a comment earlier, it's like, how do I, the assignment is to find an open source project and to write a business model about how I would make it profitable. Well, I go back to, you're going to have to charge more for what the thing costs. And perhaps there's a ton of projects out there where either the original creator is not interested in marketing it, is not interested in producing it, or maybe they are. Let's say you take the Sparkfun GPS RDK. That's what Glenn was just talking about. We can't build that thing fast enough. Okay? Now, if you think you can build it cheaper, higher quality, if you can provide better customer service, if you can provide better documentation, that is triage. That is your opportunity to come into that market and make a lot of money. That's what I'm doing. I think you should do that too in other markets. Not mine, because I like mine. But I think there's other market opportunities for sure. Yes, ma'am, in the back. Many times. So I'll take, for example, the FIO. So there's a board that was designed by a Japanese professor, okay? And it was this neat little board, and we started selling it, and like I say, 10 weeks later, it shows up on Seed Studio, right? A competitor of ours, and they are manufacturing the exact same board. We've been copied, okay? Except that they made the reset button a little taller, and they made the power switch a little better. You say, oh, that's interesting. Why did they do that? And we got one and we played with it. We're like, wow, this reset button is much better. It feels better. And this power switch on the side, wow, that's a really good feature. Our board was open source. So when they copied it, they had every right to do that. They made some improvements. Well, guess what? Those improvements are open source. So what did I do? I took those and back into my design, and I made a couple more improvements, and I reposted the product. Okay? So now we have a second version. And I know the founder of Seed Studio. He and I have hung out and had many drinks together in Shenzhen. And I was just asking Eric the other day, I was like, Eric, you don't sell that board anymore. Why don't you sell that board? He said, oh, I wasn't a good seller. I go, that's wild, because my board, with the improvements that you made, I sell tons of them in America. So I took his improvements, I made it better. Now the question is, why are people buying from my version and not his version? Is it the improvements, or is it because they can order and have it shipped overnight in America, right? Is it because the tech support is in real time, right? He has a time delay in China. It's more difficult to answer emails quicker. You can't do direct chat unless you've got somebody up at night. So there's a support aspect, there's a customer service aspect, there's a speed aspect for reasons why users are buying my product and not Eric's. But yes, we get copied all the time, and we're keeping an eye on that, and we're watching if they make any improvements and whether or not we can revise our own products based on our competition. We do. We pay strong attention. You have a question for Glenn. Ooh, Glenn. Alicia's got a question.
Oh, boy.
What do you wish you knew when you were an MBA student?
Oh, gosh. How to deal with people better? I don't know.
No, tell us more.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you should not underestimate, if I look back in my career, is how do you manage through change, and most importantly, how do you manage the change through the people you need to work with, right? And part of my career early on was going through M&A. It was at that point when I first started at Arrow. It was about a $6 billion company. When I left, it was, I think, 34 billion, whatever. And so we grew through M&A. And I think one of the things, a skill that I wish I would have honed on earlier, sooner in my career, was managing through change, and managing through sort of the nuances of that human element of getting things done. If you're going to work for a big company, my advice to this group is understand how important stakeholder management is at a large organization. Because unlike Sparkfun, right, where Nathan and I can do anything we want and do it quickly, at a larger organization, stakeholder management, getting buy-in to your idea is extremely important. And so those human skills is a continuous process throughout your career. And I think, to answer Alicia's questions, I think I was sort of dismissive of that early on. It was all about the financial model, the usual levers from a financial perspective, all the above. But ultimately, the human element was a huge factor in my success. And frankly, I learned that probably in mid-career, when I should have sort of picked up on that sooner in my career, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Yes.
Why did you switch?
Glenn, did you hear that question? Why did you switch?
I need to do something different, right? I think, I was very fortunate in my career where the company was growing. I had done so many different things from operations to sales to running a global business dev group, being a GM, but ultimately it was a big company. And truth be told, it just got too big for me. And like Nate, I like being in the muck of things. And a small tech company is something I never really ran before. Looked at Nate's background, looked at Sparkfun. It was just very interesting to me. And I thought I could learn a lot. Truth be told, I thought it was going to be a 2-year gig. Here I am 8 years later. Because, it's just something that really, interested me. And it was just time for a change. I was with the company over 20 years at that point. And yeah, it was just time for a change for me.
How many employees are at Arrow? Was it in the
gosh,
thousands?
20 some odd thousand people, I think. I've lost track.
20,000. So some odd 20,000 employees. He was in the top 200 on his way to becoming CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Tells you something that he exited to come work for a privately held IoT company, because that's the speed at which we can move.
Yeah. The other thing, as I think about Alicia's question, when I was younger, I wasn't planning to, I thought I was going to be the stockbroker, right? I was going through my Series 7 and 11 exam, worked at Arrow as a temp. One of the things that I wish I would have learned earlier in my career is not to be so focused on title, if that makes sense. Focus on the things that, to what Nate mentioned earlier, interest you. Focus on the currency of learning things early in your career, because that's an asset, and that is something that'll help you throughout your entire career. Don't be so focused on the ladder climb. I know I sound like an old man at this point, but it's true. Focus on the experiences early in your career, because that will hold it together for you through the thick and thin of things, whether it's a business downturn, whether you're in a QBR at a larger company. Focus on getting as much experience as you can, regardless of title. I think that's the most important thing you could do as a young professional. Nate just happened to do it at a smaller company, right? He started it. But if you're going to work at a larger company, do the assignments. Be the person that they know who to go to get stuff done, because you will get access and exposure to things that you would not normally get in your normal 9-to-5 role within a company. Just get stuff done.
Yes. The question is, did I develop a product doing customer research first, or did I just sort of turn on the website and see if my idea sold? Right. It's a nuanced answer, but in short, I looked at the state of the market, and what I saw was friction points. It wasn't about the product. It was the fact that there was already product out there, but the websites were so bad, and it was so difficult to get these things in different languages from different countries and international shipping, that I was like, why is this so hard? I wonder if I can make it more easy. And what we found is that by solving those friction points, accepting credit card online, having stock stateside, making it so that international orders flow easily, regardless of the market, just remove the friction points and you have triage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Turned it on January 3rd of 2003.
And just waited for customers to trickle in.
7 hours later, I had an order. So some of the tricks back then was having just content online. At the time, it was called a blog, right? Now it would be TikTok or YouTube videos or however you do it. At the time, I posted some of my products on eBay so that folks could find me on eBay and be like, oh, yeah, I need a pick programmer. Cool, okay, and what is the Sparkfun company? Boop, boop. Right? And suddenly they're hitting my website instead of eBay. So you have to find ways of hitting sort of that initial inertia. But eventually, you don't need to advertise. You just need to find creative ways of getting your name and product out there. So Glenn, I've got a question for you. And we've got a building in Boulder, Colorado. It's 80,000 square feet. And pre-COVID, everybody was coming into the building. And so my question to you, what does the future of work look like? And that could be at Sparkfun, or that could be like holistically across the world. What does the future of work look like?
Man, you didn't tell me you were going to ask these questions, Nate. It's okay. No, in all seriousness, it's hybrid. It's a hybrid work environment. I've been through a lot of changes and challenges in the market from .com to the credit. I mean, but honestly, the past 5 years have been interesting. In terms of the work environment, I think it's hybrid. I think the days of, my opinion only, of everyone being in the office 5 days a week is gone. And that's good and bad. I think for us, there are a lot of benefits. As I've been saying recently, where you live is local, talent's global. We have folks everywhere now that we could tap into from a talent perspective. And that's a good thing. I could tell you, though, the biggest challenge we had in terms of this office environment is, as Nate mentioned, at Sparkfun, you had engineers, sales, we also had production manufacturing, right? And so you had a subset of folks who, once COVID hit, were remote. And then the other folks were, paying our bills. They were shipping product out. They were making product out. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that wasn't a hard sort of transition. But I think so long as you have the right people, the right mindset, say, the nature of your work requires you to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes that requires you to be at the office, and people came around. But in terms of the office, I think it's hybrid. I think so long as you have the right tool set, the right people, I will say it puts a lot more pressure on the managers to make sure, I'm less concerned about people being in the office. I'm more concerned about the engagement of those employees.
Yeah.
Right. And that's on the managers to manage. And I think that's what gets lost in all of the news buzz around. It's like that has changed. It's on the managers and leadership team to figure out how you manage to do that. It's not been easy, but I think it's a transition we've managed fairly well, quite honestly. But to answer your question, it is hybrid. Now, we'll say, from an engagement perspective, you got to check yourself, right? If you're never in the office and you happen to be 5 miles away as an employee, you got to check yourself in terms of your engagement process, but it's also on the manager itself. Nate and I make a point to meet every Friday, face to face. Nate and I make a point to be in the office pretty much every Tuesdays and Thursdays, pretty much. Guess what happens? 90% of the company comes in the office, right? So it's how you lead it, how you manage it. But I know there's a lot of discussion about workforce. It's changed. It's on the leadership team to figure out how you maintain the level of engagement that you had when it was in the office all the time. So I'll get off my soapbox. But
I would also say it depends on where you are in your career. So my group employs a handful of folks that are later in their career, and they're very remote. They're in the UK, they're in Hawaii, they're in Virginia. You all will be graduating soon, right? And I would recommend you be aware of a fully remote job and how that may hurt your future career. There's a lot of things you got to learn in the office. There's a lot of human interpersonal skills that you got to learn on the job. And that doesn't have to be 100% in the office. But at the start of your career, just be very aware that you may need to be there to run into people, to talk about that thing, to learn those kind of skills early. So yeah, it's a new world, and Sparkfun is very open to remote workers. Yeah. Any other questions? I think we're good. Yeah. Thank you all. Yeah. Thank you much. Thank you, Brian.
Cheers.